Wild Boys of the Road is a pre-code drama from 1933. Frankie, Darro, and Edwin Phillips are teenage boys who see their family struggle during the Great Depression. Wanting to help them out, the boys leave home hoping to find jobs in the big city. Then they'll be able to wire some money back to their parents. On their journey, they befriend a girl, played by Dorothy Coonan, who's disguised as a boy and hopes to send money home to her family too. The trio encounter a myriad of colorful characters and are confronted with heartbreaking obstacles at every turn. This is another one of Warner Brothers' ripped from the headlines movies, where they would take controversial news stories and turn them into films. Some notable examples of these are Black Legion and They Won't Forget, both of which I've previously reviewed. This film was inspired by a large influx of teenage boys who were traveling across the country during the Great Depression. Many of these kids were trying to find work, but others were just trying to escape poverty-stricken neighborhoods their families were in. One of these self-proclaimed wild boys of the road was Robert Mitchum. Yeah, at age 14 he left home and traveled the US by hopping freight trains. Not only was hitching a ride by freight train illegal, but it was pretty dangerous too. The film is unapologetic when it comes to depicting these treacherous conditions. Director William Wellman does an exceptional job presenting these situations in a variety of ways. At times, he blatantly shows the struggles the kids had to endure, but at other times, he chooses to show very little, allowing for the audience to fill in the gaps with their minds. And usually, those are the scenes people remember best. Probably the most famous scene in the whole movie is when a character gets their leg run over by a train. He gets clunked in the head and has trouble getting off the track. The film cuts between this, the incoming train, and his friends watching in horror. When the impact finally occurs, you don't see anything, but you feel exactly what everyone is going through. Every time I watch this film, I'm amazed with how powerful this scene is. The film is littered with numerous memorable shots. They make the world feel more expansive, and you forget the whole thing was shot entirely in California, and mostly on the Warner's backlot. Something I love about this movie is how the look gradually changes throughout the film. What I mean is, when the film starts, it looks like a typical studio picture. The sets are great, everyone looks clean, and the filmmaking is very familiar. Everything looks sleek and polished, but when the boys make their decision to leave, that all changes. The lighting stops looking artificial, the sets look run down, and the film adopts a more guerrilla filmmaking style. On top of that, the film just has an overall murky feel. It kind of looks like there's a persistent grimy film over the screen the whole time. I think all these elements work wonders in giving the film its edge. If the movie looked like a typical Hollywood film the whole time, then I don't think it would be nearly as successful at sucking the viewer in. Another reason why the film feels so grand is due to its memorable cast. It's a menagerie of colorful side characters that make the most of their limited screen time. Many of these supporting players would go on to have successful acting careers. Probably the most notable is Ollie, played by Sterling Holloway. Holloway was a familiar face in tons of classic media, but most people will recognize his signature voice.
Well, where are you bound to?
To my father in Chicago. I've got a letter.
He would later become a staple at the Walt Disney Studios and voice many characters in their shorts and feature films, most memorably the Cheshire Cat, Kaa, and Winnie the Pooh. In terms of highlighting one specific performance, I found that I really couldn't pick just one. The chemistry between Frankie, Darro, Edwin Phillips, and Dorothy Coonan is enigmatic to watch, and I find that they all complement each other very well. Frankie Darro does an amazing job portraying a boy who's trying to grow up too fast. No one asks him to leave home. He does it because he feels it's necessary. There's some relatability to his thinking because we all want to grow up as soon as possible. Once he's thrusted into the adult world, he tries to do what he thinks an adult would do, be the emotional rock for his gang. However, he finds it tough to do this all the time, and often shows his true emotions. Even for less harrowing scenes, like when he has to sell his car, his true feelings come out. Darro does an excellent job balancing a pensive persona with some more vulnerable moments. He always feels like a boy who's trying to tackle something he's obviously not ready for. Edwin Phillips is the most practical character in the trio. He's usually the one asking questions and wondering if certain actions are the right ones to take. He's not afraid to face hard situations, but he'll always try and make sure he and his friends never take an unnecessary risk. And then there's Coonan, who's just as tough as any of the guys on the road. That doesn't mean she'll win every fight she's in, but she isn't looking to be pushed around by people. At a glance, you might get the impression she's a tomboy, but she isn't. She dresses as a boy to blend in and not make herself a target. She's probably the most loyal of the three. When she meets Darro and Phillips, she stands by them, no matter how tough it gets. In a typical Hollywood film, she'd become the love interest for Darro, but that never happens. Her relationship to both of the boys is strictly platonic, which I like because it makes the film stand out, and a forced romance would have muddled the message of the movie. Frankie Darro was born December 22nd, 1917 to a family of acrobats. As soon as he could walk, his father was training him in the family business. But in 1922, his parents divorced, ending their acrobatic act. However, hoping to capitalize on Darro's athletic agility at such a young age, he was brought to Hollywood and made his screen debut at age 6. He had steady work throughout all the 1920s and early 30s, but made a name for himself in 1933. 1933. That year, he starred in this and Mayor from Hell with James Cagney, both of which were huge hits. He enjoyed some success in movies afterwards, but he never attained star status due to his height. Darro never grew past 5'3", which limited the amount of leading ladies he could have. From the mid-30s on, he was reduced to either jockeys, waiters, or uncredited parts. For his most famous roles, you never saw his face. He was the voice of Lampwick in Disney's Pinocchio, one of the Disney classics Sterling Holloway did not star in, and he was in the suit of Robbie the Robot in Forbidden Planet, but was fired early on for being drunk on set. Darro would stay in supporting roles in A movies or leading roles in B movies for the rest of his career. He would pass away on Christmas Day of 1976 of a heart attack. He was 59 years old. It's a shame his height was such a deterror, because Darro proved many times that he was a very talented actor. Not much is known about his co-star Edwin Phillips. This was his film debut, and he only made 2 more movies after this, one of which was a TV movie from 1954. From what I gathered, he preferred starring in plays over films. He starred in 22 plays over the course of 35 years. His last play was the original run of Sunrise at Campobello, which ran from January of 58 to May of 59. He would pass away from cancer in 1981. He was 69 years old, so it just looks like Phillips was more interested in having a Broadway career, which he definitely achieved. Dorothy Coonan was born November 25th, 1913. She started her career out as a dancer, and at age 14 found work at Warner Brothers. She was in many of their early 30s musicals like 42nd Street and The Gold Diggers in 1933. Her big break came when William Wellman cast her in this film. During the making of the movie, Wellman and her fell in love, and they were married the next year. She retired from films to raise their family. Well, not entirely. Wellman did give her a small but memorable role in The Story of G.I. Joe. She plays a nurse who marries a soldier. Wellman and her had 7 kids together and were married for over 40 years. The marriage ended with his death in 1975. She would never remarry and would pass away on September 16, 2009. She was 95 years old. Frankie, Darro, Edwin Phillips, and Dorothy Coonan were all talented actors who could have gone on to have successful film careers, and I find it fascinating the different avenues their lives took them. This film is a testament to all their talents and what could have been. So if you're interested in seeing 3 talents that could have been, or one of the hardest hitting dramas of the pre-code era, then I highly recommend Wild Boys of the Road.